It's not the carbs. Those four words slammed into me like a gut punch while I was roaming the cereal aisle at Whole Foods back in 2018. I was there, clutching a box of steel-cut oats, squinting at the nutrition facts because, naturally, I do when a neurologist buddy pinged me a study link. It had nothing to do with gluten. It wasn't about calories either. It was all about bacteria, the critters living in my gut, the ones whispering instructions straight to my brain. I'd logged 17 years as a clinical nutritionist. I'd guided thousands of patients. I'd built a career on the whole grain gospel, fiber, B vitamins, heart health benefits, all supposedly tied to sharper memory and a lower dementia risk. The FDA and the WHO both cemented that story into public health policy. Headlines shouted it from every corner. Whole grains became brain armor. So when the Nature paper hit in 2020, showing gut microbiome shifts show up before the first Alzheimer's plaque even appears, I didn't just read it, I lived it. That study didn't merely challenge the carb story, it turned it on its head. Beat tonal. We're here because the science has moved on, and the marketers peddling whole grains haven't caught up yet. Beat visual. I'm Walter Crane. I've spent 17 years running nutrition clinics, publishing peer-reviewed work on metabolic health, and advising health systems on dietary guidelines. In this video, you'll see why the mainstream whole grain advice is quietly collapsing under the weight of new gut-brain science. You'll meet the researchers who measured how gut bacteria hijack cognition. You'll learn exactly how outdated carb-centric dogma is handing millions the wrong prescription for brain health. And most importantly, you'll walk away with the unsettling truth. The fiber in your quinoa might not be saving your brain. Now, before we go any further, this is System Dark. We dig into the stories the food industry doesn't want you to question. And today, the whole grain empire has a skeleton in its pantry. Beat text pop. Disclaimer: the content in this documentary is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not medical advice. Always consult your physician before changing your diet or health regimen. Let's start with the myth that shaped a generation. For decades, public health authorities, including the World Health Organization, have championed whole grains as a cornerstone of brain-healthy diets. In 2015, the WHO rolled out its Global Action Plan on Dementia, linking plant-rich diets, especially those high in whole grains, to a reduced risk of non-communicable diseases like dementia. The logic was simple: fiber feeds the gut feeds the brain, and whole grains are the easiest way to get fiber. Eat more oats, live longer, remember more. End of story. Beat Zoom. But here's what they left out. That logic assumes all fibers are equal. It assumes the gut microbiome reacts the same way to every slice of whole wheat bread. It assumes the bacteria in your gut aren't quietly rewriting your neural code. And it assumes the FDA's stamp of approval means the science is settled. It's not. Beat visual. The FDA demands scientific evidence before green-lighting health claims for probiotics or microbiome-related products. Yet for whole grains, the agency leans on observational studies, like the Harvard School of Public Health analysis that shows diets rich in whole grains support cardiovascular health, a factor linked to cognitive function. That's a correlation, not causation, and correlations don't build brains. Beat tonal. But what if the real connection isn't the grain, it's the bugs? Enter the gut-brain axis, a term that barely existed in nutrition textbooks a decade ago. Peer-reviewed research now shows gut microbes crank out metabolites, short-chain fatty acids, neurotransmitter precursors, that directly shape cognition, mood, and even the march of neurodegeneration. In 2019, a study in PMC documented how microbial chatter with the central nervous system can tweak memory formation and emotional regulation. In other words, your gut doesn't just support your brain, it directs it. Beat Zoom. Then came the bombshell. In 2020, Researchers at Nature Medicine unveiled a groundbreaking study tracking gut microbiome changes in early Alzheimer's patients. They discovered that shifts in gut bacteria surfaced years before any clinical symptoms, well before plaques, tangles, or memory loss. The message was crystal clear. Your gut isn't merely reacting to your brain, it's predicting it. So let me ask you this. If your oatmeal's fiber isn't feeding the right bacteria, is it really feeding your brain? That's the question we're here to answer. Because here's the truth no one wants to admit. The whole grain gospel was built on assumptions, not evidence. It was built on marketing, not microbiology, and it's still being sold as science. So today, we revisit the nutritionist. We expose the hidden cost of the carb-centric diet, and we ask, can you still protect your brain without falling for the fiber myth? Stick around. The answers might break your breakfast habit. Looking back over the last 10 years, whole grain research has felt like a wild roller coaster ride. Early meta-analyses connected everyday eating of wheat, oats, and rye with slight gains on memory tests and a more gradual climb in body mass index source. Harvard School of Public Health. But newer trials tell a messier story. Some folks sharpened their attention, others saw no shift, and a few even put on a bit of weight source. Harvard School of Public Health. So why the inconsistency? Critics zero in on three main shortcomings. First off, a lot of studies mash together all sorts of grain foods, whole grain breads, crackers, even sugary cereals, while overlooking the sneaky sugars that can cancel out fiber's perks source. WHO. Second, the one-size-fits-all story pretends every gut reacts identically to the same carb load. Third, scientists frequently skip over the micronutrient-macronutrient balance, treating fiber as if it were a single block source. FDA. Enter the gut microbiome, that bustling neighborhood of bacteria, fungi, and viruses that call our intestines home. Decades of gut-brain research now reveal that microbial metabolites hitch a ride in the bloodstream, nudging cognition, mood, and even neurodegeneration. Source: NCBI. Not all fibers are alike. Soluble fibers from oats ferment into short-chain fatty acids, SCFAs, such as butyrate, which slip across the blood-brain barrier and tweak neuronal signaling. Insoluble fibers, on the flip side, mainly bulk up stool and don't crank out those neuroactive chemicals. Source: NCBI. In a landmark study of older adults, researchers charted gut microbial makeup alongside early Alzheimer's pathology. Those with more SCFA-producing bacteria showed less amyloid buildup, hinting at a protective tie between fermentation byproducts and brain health. Source: Nature. The same crew cautioned, alterations in gut microbiota composition are associated with early Alzheimer's pathology, driving home that microbial balance, not merely grain intake, counts. So, what does this mean for the everyday person reaching for a bowl of whole grain cereal? The answer: it's all about personalization. A top microbiome researcher notes, the impact of fiber on the brain depends on who you are, not just what you eat. In practice, two people munching the same amount of barley can churn out wildly different SCFA profiles, thanks to their distinct microbial ecosystems. Source: Nature. Tailored fiber plans rest on three variables. First, the grain type decides which bacterial pathways light up. Whole grain rye, packed with arabinoxylin, fuels bifidobacterium strains that are champs at making acetate, a stepping stone to butyrate. Second, phytochemicals, phenolic acids, lignans, antioxidants tune inflammation and can boost the cognitive perks of SCFAs. Source: WHO. Third, your baseline gut microbes decide if those substrates turn into neuroprotective molecules or just get flushed out. The FDA's position underlines the need for solid proof. Before a health claim can name the microbiome, makers must demonstrate a causal link in rigorous trials. Source: FDA. That regulatory guardrail has nudged scientists to set up studies pitting personalized fiber blends against generic whole grain diets. Early findings hint that matching grain picks to a person's microbial fingerprint improves weight control and steadier attention scores, outpacing a one-size, whole grains are always good mantra source. Harvard School of Public Health. Beyond the brain, heart vascular health remains a crucial bridge. Whole grains deliver magnesium, potassium, and B vitamins, all bolstering blood vessel health, a piece tied to brain perfusion and long-term memory. Source: Harvard School of Public Health. Still, the WHO's global dietary guidelines now push plant-based patterns that feature, but don't hinge solely on whole grains. That shift mirrors a growing consensus. Diet quality matters, yet the dance between food and gut microbes decides the final physiological outcome. Source: WHO. In short, the old story, that whole grains uniformly shield the brain while keeping the waistline in check, has crumbled under nuanced data. Broad strokes, hidden added sugars, and ignoring individual gut variability explain why those early claims fell out of favor. Today's research repositions whole grains as a versatile source of fermentable fiber, whose real punch only shows up when paired with a compatible microbiome. As the science moves forward, the next frontier will probably feature point-of-care microbiome testing, letting nutritionists prescribe grain types that crank up beneficial SCFAs for each individual. Until that day comes, the safest advice is to pick a variety of minimally processed whole grains, watch added sugars, and remember that the gut, more than any single food, holds the keys to cognitive resilience. This isn't some magic trick you'll see on late-night infomercials. It's a three-step system that actually makes your gut and brain finally play nice with each other. Step 1. Take stock of what's really living down there. Kick things off with a simple stool test or just track what you've been eating lately, paying close attention to fiber, how your food's fermenting, and any wonky GI issues. You're basically creating a map of the microbial party happening in your gut, because, as it turns out, the gut-brain axis influences cognition, mood, and neurodegeneration through microbial metabolites. Source: Step 2. Go beyond your usual wheat and rice rotation. Instead of making white bread your go-to carb, why not branch out? Toss in some spelt or teff, throw in lentils for good measure, and don't sleep on cooled potatoes or green bananas. These guys bring different kinds of fiber to the table, soluble, insoluble, you name it. And that feeds your gut bugs in ways that end up cranking out short-chain fatty acids, which, by the way, are total MVPs for keeping your brain humming. Step 3. Layer in the good stuff for your noggin. Slide in omega-3 powerhouses like walnuts and flaxseed, antioxidant-packed berries, and veggies that are basically multivitamins in disguise. Whole grains already bring B vitamins and minerals to the fight, and those nutrients are tight with cardiovascular health, another piece of the puzzle when it comes to staying sharp. Source: When your blood vessels aren't throwing a tantrum, your brain gets a steady stream of oxygen and nutrients without the drama. So let's see how this plays out in real life. Jenna, 58-year-old marketing big shot, had been fighting a losing battle with brain fog after years of leaning on refined carbs. Her initial tests showed a gut microbiome that looked more like a ghost town than a thriving city, and post-meal bloating that felt like a full-time job. She switched things up: white bread out, einkorn, chickpeas, and quinoa, cooked and cooled, in, each one bringing its own special fermentable fiber to the party. Blueberries became her afternoon ritual, and a tablespoon of ground flaxseed hit the spot every morning. 12 weeks later, Jenna couldn't believe the difference. Suddenly, focus was easier to grab, recall was snappier, and memory tests showed a solid bump in working memory. Turns out, researchers have noticed the same thing. Alterations in gut microbiota composition are associated with early Alzheimer's pathology. Source: the best part. She didn't have to go full carb fast to get there. The protocol worked with complex carbs, not against them, keeping the fuel supply flowing to both her gut microbes and her brain. So why does this whole thing skip the tired carbs are evil script? Because the old playbook painted every carb with the same broad brush, pushing low-carb or keto diets that often dumped fiber-rich foods faster than you can say cheat day. But here's the thing. The FDA isn't messing around. Scientific evidence is the name of the game when it comes to health claims tied to probiotics or your microbiome. Source: translation. You can't just slap a boost your brain sticker on something without the receipts. By keeping complex carbs in the mix, just making them way more interesting, you still get the cardiovascular perks the WHO keeps raving about, noting that dietary patterns rich in plant-based foods, including whole grains, reduce risk of non-communicable diseases such as dementia. Source: here's where this thing really shines. It's not a one-size-fits-all deal. You're not stuck eating the same old grains day in and day out. Ancient varieties, legumes, resistant starches, mix it up, and you'll feed a whole ecosystem of microbes that each thrive in their own little niche. That diversity. It's like a backstage pass for your brain, letting it bathe in a richer cocktail of metabolites that cross the blood-brain barrier and keep neurons firing on all cylinders. Bottom line: check your gut's guest list, diversify your plate, and stack the deck with brain-friendly nutrients. 3 moves that turn whole grains from a boring side dish into a powerhouse ecosystem. The payoff: a gut that's actually rooting for your brain, delivering the energy and micronutrients complex carbs bring to the table without the crash and burn. Your gut isn't merely chewing up meals. It actually steers the way you think, feel, and even age. New studies reveal the microbiome isn't a background actor in brain health. It's the one calling the shots. SOR, PMC 6369707. That's why public health folks focus less on slashing carbs and more on feeding the right ones. Whole grains do more than dump fiber. They act as prebiotic fuel, nudging microbes to launch anti-inflammatory messages toward your brain. Source: HSPH, Harvard, Edu/Nutrition Source. The downstream perks: lower odds of neurodegeneration, crisper thinking, and even steadier mood, all linked to what you're eating. Governments now demand solid science to back any microbiome claim. After all, not every carb is cut from the same cloth. Source: FDA, Gov. The WHO has already charted it. Diets rich in plants can knock down dementia risk. But here's the twist. It's not simply about more plants. It's about the right plants, those cultivated to suit your microbiome. Source: WHO Int. So how do you put this into practice right now? Kick off with the free gut profile checklist hanging in the description. Snap a quick pic of your grocery haul, spill your grain stories in the comments, and tag a question for our Q&A. We'll pick the top ones and answer them next week. The science says it plain. Your next meal isn't merely fuel. It's medicine, plain and simple. Hit subscribe for more science-backed nutrition breakthroughs that cut through the noise.